Welcome to this edition of When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine, a discussion of sustainable living and what that means to you and me. I'm Jay Warmke.
And I'm Annie Warmke.
You are. And today we're going to talk about emotional resiliency, or this too shall pass. Right?
That is really...
That's resilient. That's resiliency.
Oh, it seems pat.
It is.
Condescending.
It is. I thought about it. I had a person I used to work with, and she always used to say, too bad, so sad, I'm glad you're mad. But that seemed a little bit not as nice.
That is cruel.
Than this too shall pass. Or anything that doesn't kill us makes us stronger. That's another one of those.
These are all just total BS. So.
I know. Well, it's the philosophy of cliche.
Well, the problem being that we don't have the steps before we get to that cliche to figure it out. So those things are very trite. That's the word I like.
Well, it saves money on counselors if you just read fortune cookies. So
I had no idea. I'm going to remember that when I'm talking to people that are really struggling.
So we're talking about, and why is emotional resiliency with sustainability? Well, this is even one I can identify the connection with. But tell me exactly what you see emotional resiliency as, Miss Annie.
Wow. Well, Miss Annie, this is completely my take on things. And I just want to say the reason I wanted to talk about this is that it's unbelievable to me since the 2 years of the pandemic, how people are struggling at every level of life emotionally. And I believe that a lot of that comes from the fact that we don't have the ability to bounce back, to be resilient. And I also believe it's because we have not been taught to think. So anyway, so resiliency is what gives people the psychological strength to cope with stress and hardship. And the pandemic and everyday life, it seems like in this country, we were talking about this 4 years of number 45 and 2 years of COVID, and then now a war. It's a lot.
Well, and resiliency, it really brings it to my mind anyway. I mean, we're recording this really at the beginning stages of the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. And you were working with a lot of these Ukrainian women farmers who were set to come this next week, in fact, to come visit our farm. And in the lead up to the war, we kept talking to them, and these are just middle class folks who are thinking, I want to get something on sale at Kroger's or whatever. Yeah. And what can I buy when I'm on my trip? And every time you went to them, you said, are you afraid about this? And no, that's crazy. I mean, this is 2022. No, people don't do these things.
We have things to do. This is what Natalia told me. She's a businesswoman, and she teaches other women about business around agriculture. So she's very educated and intelligent, and she speaks English, which is great because we can communicate. And she said, I have children in school, I have my work, I have a garden to plant, and I'm going to my country home. I know. In a month, and so I don't have time for war.
Yeah, we can't have a war. The dishes need doing.
That's right. Well, that's what I would say.
Right, but these people at the very extreme are now saying, okay, we have to practice extreme resilience.
Oh yeah, everything's on the line.
So as we're talking about
normal.
this, we're saying, okay, apply these things. That's the extreme case, but there are lesser cases that are going to be impacted within everybody's lives.
Everybody, not just Ukrainian people, but everybody on the planet is going to be impacted. And we already have been, because we live in a global society. So the reason I wanted to talk about this, and I'm glad you brought up about the Ukrainian women in agriculture, because this has impacted us. It's impacted me. I've never directly known anybody who's been in a war. I have taken women to war zones, and we have met people who've been through it. The conflict sometimes still going on to some extent. One time there was a gun battle in the street outside of where we were sleeping. But it's not the same thing as today, where I know these women, I'm connected to they have a lot of the same things that I care about. They love their kids, they love the soil. And so I wanted to talk about this because I also see everybody I know struggling to some extent from emotional issues and not having, most of them not having the resiliency, the ability to snap back. They don't have the mental reservoir of strength that people are able to call on in these kinds of experiences. And psychologists believe that resilient individuals are better able to handle adversity and rebuild their lives after a struggle. And that doesn't mean that we don't feel these things and struggle. I mean, I feel like I am emotionally a very resilient person, and I work directly with people. I have several people I'm working with right now. I used to call it consulting. Now it's become
Now it's counseling.
but that's okay. That's what consulting is anyway. And I love doing it because it's really exciting to meet up with somebody and partner with them and help them find this reservoir that's in all of us if we massage it. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Well, and part of it is the idea that in every person's life, bad things are going
Absolutely.
to happen. So how do you get out the other end of it without just being, destroyed by it or
right.
diminished?
Well,
by
you
it?
have to develop, and you can. Everybody can learn to do this. Every life is an emotional roller coaster. And if you say it isn't, then you're not paying attention.
Or you're a sociopath.
Yeah, well, that's that. But then sociopath, you don't pay attention. So I think, the goal for me is to be kind of on an even keel. I want to be in a calm place so I can draw on those resources that I have at being resilient. And that helps us to sustain life. It helps us to go back to, so we have something harsh happen in life. Our house burns down, we get fired, our dog dies, somebody's very cruel to us. It doesn't have to be extreme, but if we have this pool to draw on, this reservoir inside of ourselves, and we have the skill sets that we can use to bring ourselves back to a new normal or to a calmer place, and that's what we lack in this country.
So would one of the very first steps is be aware of what you're feeling?
Well, to some extent, but I think first of all, it's to learn some and we'll talk about this in a minute, but it really is to learn from the mishaps and the misfortunes that you have in life, and to also learn how to rely on others, to draw on a tribe of people that know stuff you don't know or know you well enough to say, hey, remember when you did this, and repeat to you some of the things you've said to them to help them. So there's this whole network of what needs to happen. So and so a lot of bad things can happen. A lot of harsh things can happen. Sometimes things are too good, and like you won the lottery or whatever, you don't have the ability to deal with it. People think it's just about money, but it would be about everything in your life. So you need this toolkit that I call it. And instead of falling into despair and hiding from your problems and living with unhealthy coping strategies like getting drunk, getting high, too much sex, just all the shopping all the time, all the crazy things that people do to try to fill up this despair and try to hide it. We need to take life's difficulties head on, and we need to say, all right, what are we going to do about it? And if I can't think of what to do, I go to you or my friends that I'm close to that know me, that know the worst parts of me, and they still love me. So that's important.
Well, one thing I was thinking about when this and when the Ukrainian situation was arising, and I don't know if this falls in your guidelines, but I was thinking whenever I'm hit with an immediate crisis, whether it's real or perceived, I always have sort of an immediate reaction. And that immediate reaction is almost always wrong. And I was just thinking, I need to remind myself to just say, listen, I'm going to wait for just a little bit here and try and absorb it and process it and understand it before I come up with a solution. Is that something that makes any sense?
Well, that's one of the things that can happen, although that takes a real skill building. And so that's one of the things that when we talk about what they call post-traumatic growth, that is really that pool, that reservoir of resiliency that you've established, those skills, those tools in that toolkit. And one of them would be just tell your brain, okay, shut up for right now. let's just listen. Let's just listen to Annie. She's usually got this right. and
Okay.
she's
I'll just have that tattooed on my
yeah,
arm.
and
All
she's
right,
just,
no problem.
being emotional, which is, but then at some point it becomes clear that there's a need maybe to just express the sadness, to express the horror, and then move on. What can I do about it? So that's that post-traumatic growth. And these changes, these things, this toolkit can bring great calm and great just goodness to life. Everybody I know is having what they call anxiety attacks. So I wanted to develop these resiliency skills so that I can have a deeper appreciation for life, and I can have a better sense of my own capabilities, and I can have stronger connections to others. And sometimes that's hard. Like for me, the stronger connections, when something is deeply hurting me, or I'm feeling very low about something, I need to have the words, and I understand this about myself, before I can talk about it. So I've done things like make a deal with other people. When I'm low, I promise, I pinky swear, I'm going to come and try to tell you what's happening, because I can't figure it out. I never figure it out on my own. I need other people to say, you're doing great. Everything's, what would you tell yourself? Well, I would tell myself to, move on, or tell myself go sit alone and do some meditation. But I can't think of that when I'm upset sometimes. So
Well, one thing that you used to do that helped me a lot is if I was overly worrying about something, you'd say, okay, let's make an appointment, a time to allocate for worry. On Monday at 10 o'clock,
right.
we're going to spend an hour worrying about this, but you're not allowed to worry about it till then. And you're like, oh, okay, all right, I can do that. It doesn't really work. I mean, you
It
still
does
worry
work.
about
No,
it a little
because
bit.
you can say tomorrow at 3:00, I'm going to worry about it. And then you set it aside.
And if it pops back into your head, say, wait, oh, okay, that's
It's
for
not
tomorrow.
3:00. It's not 3:00. And
Yeah.
you know what? If it's 3:00 the next day and you really do need to do it, which probably 99.9% of the time is totally not necessary, you might have already worked it out. Another thing is to say, I'm not going to do anything about it tonight. If I sleep on it, it's going to look different in the morning.
Right.
And I swear to God, almost 100% of the time it will. But it also gives you a chance to think, all right, I'm going to talk to so-and-so. They know about that law, or they know about that lawn care thing, or they know about how to get the copies made.
Or a good attorney.
Yeah, that's right. Let me find a good
Well,
attorney.
I always like the quote from Mark Twain where he said, I'm an old man and I've had many troubles, most of which never happened.
Yes. So here's the deal. Most resilient people roll with the punches, as they say. So they may be crying and unhappy and temporarily knocked off their central point, but they're going to look for the new normal, and they're going to say, okay, I have to shift things slightly.
So Stella will get her groove back.
That's right. And so resiliency has a lot of benefits for daily life. Not just for major catastrophes. And the thing is that I think I know there are people who have the abilities naturally with certain personality traits. Other people have to learn this. So some people can remain unflappable in the face of challenge. And these behaviors are not just inborn traits, but they are things we can learn. And it's a complex series of retraining your brain with new messages, and then acting it out and seeing the positiveness, and also connecting with others who want to help you, who want to share and work with you.
Okay, well, we'll continue that in a minute, but I want to let everyone know you were listening to When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine with Jay and Annie Warmke, reminding you again, it is indeed the end of the world as we know it.
And thank God.
Thank God. So we're talking about emotional resiliency, and I think you were just saying there are certain tools, certain things you can learn. I don't know if
certain things that traits that either we have intuitively or we have learned, or that we can learn. And the first one is emotional awareness. So, I wanted to understand how I react to life. I have a pretty good handle on that, and I worked hard at it. Because I don't think I was born with a natural ability to think resiliently. I think that's one of the things I always was so impressed with you, when we were first together. I'm still impressed, but I was very impressed in the beginning because you seem to have this natural, so don't get your chest all puffed up and get the fat head, but I've told you this 1,000 times if I've told it once, that you had this natural ability to have a basic emotional awareness. Yes, you, like I asked you the other day when I was crying about my friends in Ukraine, and you said, are you going to cry every day about this? And I said, no, just for a little bit, not all day long. And I said, don't you find this sad? I don't understand why everybody isn't crying about the sadness of this. And you said, well, I get it intellectually.
I say I'm sad in my head, but not in my heart.
Yeah. And so, but that there is a need for that tool to be in the toolkit. I need to not be empathetic all the time, and you need to be more empathetic. No, well, the point is, I'm not saying it as a derogatory or a bad thing. I'm saying we have to work at this resiliency. Our culture does not reward us for having emotional awareness. We should be doing what we're told, which is go shopping, be in debt, believe in the government, believe in insurance, believe in all the things that actually that's another show. So anyway, so you want to have an awareness of what you're feeling and why, and understand the feelings of others at the same time, because maybe they're in better touch with themselves. Okay, so then next you want to have an internal locus of control, and that's something that is really believing that it isn't the outside forces. When we say somebody made me feel that or do that, it's saying
rather than be a victim of the situation, you just at least own it.
Yeah. So if I was in a meeting once where there were high up government officials, and they called all of us ladies in agriculture. And I immediately reacted to that. And I said, I'm not a lady. I'm a woman. I'm a farmer. I work hard.
Okay.
And I needed to say that, because those external forces were pushing, and I don't want to be controlled by that. And I think that's what we have to do, is be transparent and put it on the table. We also need to learn to be a lot more positive in situations and believe in our own strength in those situations. So creating some sense of optimism about my own personal power to speak up and say, I'm a woman, I'm a farmer, don't call me a lady. Not everybody's going to do that.
Well, one thing that I do, and maybe this is in the same vein, is oftentimes when confronted with a challenge or whatever, I'll usually try and remind myself, somebody can do this, so why not me?
Can't I?
Yeah, I've got those abilities.
That's some things that are in the toolkit. Or I'm smart enough to figure it out, or I'm smart enough to ask other people to help me. I mean, there are a lot.
Darn it, people like me.
I know
right?
it. I know it. What was the name of that character?
I don't even know. Yeah.
Carrie Starr always says that.
Yeah. All right.
I can't think of the name of it anyway. So, but that's a good mantra. That would be a good mantra for your toolkit. The next time somebody's giving you baloney or you're doubting yourself, but you could do it, then you tell yourself,
I tell myself that Ben Carson can perform brain surgery. I mean, geez, I can do pretty much anything.
Yeah. Well, so the idea is that resilient people see positives in most situations, and they believe in the strength of that. And so it's like my grandma used to say, you could throw me into a pile of manure, and I would figure out how to.
She'd still find the pony, right?
No, she would not. She would grow roses, and they would be beautiful, and she would be positive about it. And I think that's what we have to do, is to say, analyze the situation. It adds a richness, a mental well-being. So we don't always see what's wrong. We see the other side of it as well. So I think a sense of humor is another piece of this. And honestly, this is one of the things that you have brought to my life. And I didn't mean this show to be about you, but it's true, because when things were tense, or there was a point where we couldn't figure out something, it didn't even mean we were at odds. And you would always, you still do, find some way to laugh at the difficulty of it. And the laughter would clear the air and rest our brains for a second, and then all was well in some form or fashion. And so I think we I think we have to work harder at finding humor, a nice kind of humor, a fifth grade kind of humor, and also these things give us some ability to to have perspective and learn from our mistakes rather than to deny them. So we might have to build something or write something over and over again, and then each time maybe what we do is be resilient in our practice and go to people to edit for us or come and see what we're doing and tell us what do you think is a solution. Maybe they don't know, but the Wright brothers were bike repairmen, not airplane builders. So creativity. Also spirituality, this is something we sadly lack in this country. We think religion is spiritual, and it may be for some people, but it's mostly once you get in your head, you're intellectualizing, you're not being spiritual. So
well, I think a lot of those, like the 12-step programs, they always put that layer saying, listen, I'm going to turn over to a higher power.
Yeah, I'm going to give up control.
And that helps a lot of people get through a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And you can say things like, I trust my ancestors. I mean, there are lots of beliefs that can be helpful in having spiritual practice, but also it helps you to have a deeper appreciation for life, and it boosts a sense of your own capabilities and connections to others. And some of those practices, we've had other shows about that, about really about meditation, but just also, being alone with your dog or going on a walk and hugging a tree or whatever that is. But people who are resilient have that kind of ability to help themselves, to heal themselves, to calm themselves. And that's the place we want to find, is that calm. Outside of the stimulus, we go out to eat and there are TVs there are radio playing, there are people talking really loudly. It's hard to find in some places a place to be spiritual, a place to be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so emotional resilience refers to the ability to adapt to stressful situations, whether it's where there's a lot of stimulus or whether it's because something bad happened.
I think maybe, when you were saying that, it just occurred to me. A lot of people will say this shouldn't be happening.
Right.
This, and the reality is stressful situations, bad luck, bad things are going to happen. I think maybe the first hurdle is just to get past that. This shouldn't be happening, and move on to, all right, how do I deal with
right.
this?
Well, I do think it's good. Like I saw a news clip of a woman who had a small child, a baby, and it was killed in a bombing, and she's screaming, why? And I think we sometimes want to answer that, although the why is never, you can't really. But if that's the way you begin your resiliency plan,
Sure.
then that's okay. It's if you get stuck there.
Yeah, I remember a Wayne Dyer tape I used to listen to, and he said, when you stub your toe, you get up in the middle of the night, stub your toe, you can be dancing around the room going, ow, 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 and that's appropriate. But if you're still there 4 weeks later,
right,
doing this,
that's right,
then it is suddenly not a good coping mechanism.
No. So here are some basic characteristics of people who are practicing resiliency in a natural way. And so, if you feel like you need some help with emotional resiliency, then find one of those people in your life. They do exist. Maybe you just haven't paid attention. So resilient people hold positive views of themselves and their abilities. Sometimes that's a little bit of a challenge, being, sort of too confident about our abilities, but I don't think you can ever be that confident. I think it's when you insist on your own way.
There's a difference of confidence and arrogance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So possessing the capacity to make realistic plans and stick to them. And that's really important in everyday life, personal life. That's really important with raising kids, transitioning into a new job. I mean, the first time I realized you could make lists, my first mother-in-law, I loved her to death, she showed me how to make a list when I was 19. I was like, oh, this is the answer to my anxiety. Make a list for everything. Anyway, so also have that internal locus of control where you don't blame what's outside of you. It's important to assess that and understand what those things are, but then how do they become tools, or how do you eliminate them because they're in the way? Being a good communicator. This is huge if you want to be resilient. We meet people, we see them on the news, who have the vocabulary of about 400 words. And I'm not being sarcastic, because one time when I was working with girls from a rural area and they were so frustrated all the time, I counted words in a 2-hour meeting and they were at 425.
And about half of them are got.
Yes. So the problem being that you can't express yourself effectively if you have 400 words.
But even if you use a lot of words, I remember talking to a guy who was like so thrilled with his own vocabulary.
Oh, yeah.
And at the end, I told him, I just looked at him, he goes, listen, John, I know every word you just said, and they don't go together.
No. So here's another one, and I think this is really important because we love the word victim and we love the word survivor in this culture. So we view ourselves as fighters rather than victims. And if we become the victim of a situation, we find a way and we use our toolkit to be fighting back. And then also we have a high emotional intelligence and we manage our emotions effectively. And that doesn't mean it happens all the time, because sometimes you have to rein yourself in or ask for some help. So resilient people look at negative situations realistically, but in a way that doesn't center on blame or brooding. So let me just say real quickly before we run out of time that the way you build resilience, first of all, you embrace your challenges and your failures, and you build connections with other people. So you prioritize your relationships and you get rid of the ones who don't fit into this toolkit. If you are with somebody who's constantly berating you and finding fault, send them to the counselor or tell them to go to the door and leave. Manage your own thoughts. Work on maintaining a hopeful outlook. Find ways to, one of the things I used to do is have all these cool things I'd cut out of magazines that were about scary is good and you matter and things like that. And I put them in front of the toilet. I had to look at that and remind myself constantly. And take care of yourself. Foster wellness by taking care of your mind. Food is medicine, so eat well. Try to be active physically and avoid unhealthy coping mechanisms like drinking, drugging. Well, drinking is drugging, and shopping all the time. These are all things that bring us to a place where we can find some resiliency in our emotions. And if we don't do it as a culture, we're just really sunk.
Okay. Well, on that cheery news,
we can do it. You can learn to do it.
Okay, I'm optimistic. Okay, you've been listening to When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine with Jay and Annie Warmke. We want to thank our optimistic, resilient, and emotionally stable Emmy Award-winning producer, Adam Ridge.
I hope so.
And we want to thank you for spending just a little bit of time with us. And as your grandmother probably told you, the secret to a happy and sustainable life is...
My grandmother said, play nice with others, and she knows.
All right. Till next time.
You can find more information on living sustainably in our unsustainable world at bluerockstation.com.